he's enabling. So, and as a 3 trait unit, that's just true. All right, Nasus. Nasus is another 1-cost tank. Not going to do anything too crazy here, but the thing that makes Nasus a little more valuable than the other 1-cost tanks is Space Groove is a 1/3/5/7, and so just by playing Nasus by himself as Space Groove, you get some of that passive healing that's built in. So like a 2 Nasus, 2 Vanguard opener, or sorry, 2-star Nasus Vanguard opener, where he has like a Warmogs and something else, can actually be like one of the more insane openers. Basically, he has the highest peak of any of the 1-cost tanks just for that reason.
好玩啊，这就是睡饱
so
族嘛，
he can
这
be
是
pretty
没有
good.
睡的
He
族。
does fall off pretty hard though. I don't expect you to see like a 3-cost or 3-star Nasus.
感谢草猫的陈
even as
其
we
山
tune
订
things.
阅。
But if you want to go the
谢谢
Space
给
Groove
我
line,
们
obviously he's
啊
going to be okay, especially because he's trait pairs with Blitzcrank in the late game. But yeah, standard
哎呦，
tank.
感谢果果们的订阅，
Poppy,
感
Poppy's pretty
谢果果
similar
们
actually in that regard.
啊。
You'll play Poppy a lot. Poppy's one of the like lower 1-cost tanks.
太原
She's
安，
fine.
他
She
吉
does her
安，
job. She provides an aura every time she casts, so she'll make other tanks good. So she's somebody you want to play if you have like a good like Aatrox plus Poppy opener.
樱
Is
木安
I
啊，
think
阿
pretty
安
solid.，
吃午餐
Obviously,
等
she
快
can
改
get
了，
into
还好
Meeple
吗？
though. Meeple is one of our like Poppy in the late game. Groove line, obviously he's going to be okay, especially because he's trait pairs with Blitzcrank in the late game. But yeah.
刚才我在睡觉哦，我睡着了。我想
Poppy,
说，
Poppy's
对
pretty
啊，我
similar
小
actually
睡
in
着
that
一下。
regard. You'll
感谢
play
悲
Poppy
伤
a
会员的
lot.
订
Poppy's
阅。我
one
突然
of
想到一件事情，那这样订阅积分算这个月是不是？我是不应该一个月最后一天开台，还是其实不会？最后一天开台，来看一下不然的事情。我没有，我是说个人，你是半年自己扣啊？非常合理啊，可以翻啊，应该可以安。
the like
我
lower
又想努力冲一个
1-cost
月。
tanks. She's fine. She does her
好，我
job.
们那没关系，
She
我
provides
们
an aura every time she casts.
我
So she'll
们
make
我
other
们再
tanks
看
good.
看
So
风一安啊。
she's somebody you want to play if you have like a good like Aatrox plus Poppy opener. Is I think pretty solid. Obviously, she can get into Meeple though. Meeple is one of our pretty easy to play verticals, which we'll talk about later.
你们有
Poppy
去
is good.
看
Alright,
Z17的资讯吗？
Rek'Sai. Rek'Sai is like the
蒙
champ.
豆哥发了一个1个小时又47分的影片，介绍
champion you play with Cho'Gath.
下个
If
赛
you're playing
季。
Cho'Gath, or Rek'Sai is your Primordian tank.
嘟嘟上车，一直注意吉安啊！怎么没有波老师海报？后来都大家其他人都拿走了，我这边没有
Tank,
半
heal,
张。
keep alive.
可能是直播吗？有，明天就会直播了。
Just again, kind of really enable. But Poppy's a good tank. All right. Cost tanks. She's fine. She does her job. Of the like, if you want to go the Space Groove line, obviously he's going to be okay, especially because he's.
应该帮你留一张的，有波老师拿去
But,
拍卖。
yeah, standard tank. Poppy's pretty similar actually in that regard. You'll play Poppy a lot. Poppy's one of the like lower 1-cost tanks. She's fine. She does her
特比
job.
安啊，
She provides an aura every time she casts, so she'll make other tanks good. So she's somebody you want to play if you have like a good like Aatrox plus Poppy opener. Is I think pretty solid. Obviously, she can get into Meeple though. Meeple is one of our pretty easy to play verticals.
就问3费
We'll
赌
talk
阵
about later.
有3费赌阵，我都有
Poppy's
研
a
究
good
一个。
tank. All right. Rek'Sai. Rek'Sai is like the champion you play with Cho'Gath, if you're playing Cho'Gath, or Rek'Sai is your Primordian tank that can be the star of that Primordian comp. So again, pretty standard here. Tank, heal, keep alive. Nothing crazy as far as Rek'Sai's kit. Just again, kind of really enables those two comps.
我觉得为什么我在看他讲这些话，是因为我觉得有些东西可能是
Talon's a weird one.
到时候我们的繁中翻译是不会翻出来的，所以 得看设计师的原话。
I think surprises a lot
这
of
是
people.
这是最麻烦的，就是有可能到时候，我们的翻译呢是不会是犯错的，就像我们每个赛季都会遇到一些问题是，我们后来就不会看英文的了，但是我们的技能说明跟羁绊说明是错的。
Talon does is he stabs the target and they start bleeding, and the bleed takes a long time. It has a pretty high.
我们每一个赛季的翻译都会有好多个技能、角色跟羁绊都是翻错的，还有征服装置，所以我得看原文，我才到时候他翻错，我才知道，我才不会被骗。波波早安。
All right, Talon's a weird one. Don't sleep on Talon, but Talon's actually really powerful. You just figuring out his item build is going to be the thing that I think surprises a lot of people. But what Talon does is he stabs the target and they start bleeding, and the bleed takes a long time. It has a pretty high duration. But then he, 30 mana, he'll then jump to a new target.
30魔的塔
So
龙
he's kind of like the dot mage
流血伤害
that you see in a lot of comps. So what's interesting is if you can give him like an Edge of Night and a lot of damage, he can go around and like get everyone
然后
bleeding.
跳没有
And then
流
if you
血
have
的
a
人，
pretty good front line,
在几格内没有流血的人，
actually do surprising amount of damage. And the fact he's rogue has like a built-in Edge of Night effect as well. So he can do a lot. It's really just about keeping him alive so that bleed can do a lot of damage. If he gets targeted, he'll die very quickly. But stacking him up can be pretty good. I like this guy. I think he's very powerful. Again, I like dot mages. And then he also enables Stargazer. So if you've got that Jax and can get a Stargazer opener, he can do some.
趋势会一直改，对啊，会一直改啊。不过玩内测嘛有，总数有差吗？差很多。应该说16跟之前的17跟13、14、15都一样，就是60几张，只有17是100多张。所以我们又回到了之前的版本，就之前张数比较少的版本。那这个版本有好有坏啦，好的就是好的不多，好的就是角色比较少嘛，我们记得比较轻松，就阵容比较少，但阵容比较少就有个问题，对，阵容比较少就有个问题。以往赛季最大的问题是什么？假设平衡搞烂了，假设这个原本17有，好，假设一个是30个阵容，一个是20个阵容，那有平衡搞烂了，假设平衡搞烂了，15套不能玩，那如果有30套，有15套不能玩，代表我们还有15套可以玩。可是如果只有20套阵容，平衡搞烂了，15套不能玩，我们就剩5套可以玩。所以角色少最大问题是，有可能有时候某些版本就是大家铁头等。
Speaking of strong openers, Teemo's a weird champion this set. The thing that might catch you off guard is that Teemo with a champion this set.
Modog 对每个角色都说他是一个 weird champion。他在一费卡的时候已经说了3、4、5次，这个角色是个 weird champion。
The strong opener can stay alive. He can be a really strong opener. Speaking of strong openers, Teemo's a weird champion.
你们等一下听他几次说 weird champion
this set. The thing that might catch you off guard is that Teemo with a Ginsu's, he's a Ginsu's user. He's not a cat.
他是一个鬼锁 user， 真的假的？啊，确实。
But with Ginsu's, I think he is the strongest opener. And again, tunings can change, but Teemo with a Ginsu's can really melt down tanks because the way he works is he hits a target.
杨海公钓鱼早安呢。
Does some bonus on hit damage.
那我 PBE
the more you hit, the more that stack.
等一下我们看完之后去睡觉，半夜起来就有了。
So for example, if the enemy ever has like a 2-star Aatrox with 2 items, Teemo is actually going to be really good at taking that down over time compared to everyone else in the 1-cost space. So I really like Teemo as with Ginsu's user. Now Teemo 3 generally ends up being a little too weak in the late game. He's not one of my favorite 3 stars. but just generally a pretty good opener if you've got that Ginsu's ready to go.
恐怖游戏是什么？极限科技啊！我是已经研究到很多东西了啦，我是已经研究了蛮多的了。录影片啊有啊，有录影片啊，也可以播我打的实战画面。但我先把这个看完，等一下如果要播实战画面再来看。我们先把这个影片看完，等下可以再播实战画面。但是因为我本来是这几天平常都会播的，但是因为这次内测的时候只有英文，所以我想说我播英文的实战画面，我不确定大家想不想看。主要是也没有打很多场，他只开1天内测。
If you do a 9, he'll do his biggest amount of damage. Now, the spread is not so extreme that it's like 100 damage and 500 damage. It's not that crazy. So low rolling here isn't going to make too big a difference. But you can lose as much as like 30% of your damage from a 9 to a 1. The big thing here is if you have 2 Fate Weaver in, he'll always pick the highest number. So 2 Fate Weaver, you don't want to play him without 2 Fate Weaver, because that will make those 1s become more likely like 4s and 5s and 6s. So that's really valuable here. But otherwise, he's a pretty standard AP caster. Your Shojin JG or your Nashor's JG can do some big damage. The overkill bounces. Only other fun thing to note is when he is
overkill bonus. OK， 他有 overkill bonus。林小北零发7支片，匿名是有过量伤害的。雷恩的灵魂人999吧，其实我可以自己看啦，如果自己看无聊，我就开台给你看。
If he rolls a 9 when he's 3-starred, you'll gain some gold. So if you want to use him as an engine, you can. It's only at 3-star though. So I think when the influencers played it, it was any star level that was ended up being too powerful. So.And then finally, Vagar is.
他没有把匿名这种东西讲出来，他是不知道啊。
If he rolls a 9 when he's at 3-star though, so I think when the influencers played, so if you want to use him as if he rolls a 9 when he's 3-starred, you'll gain some gold. So if you want to use him as an engine, you can. 3-starred, you'll gain some gold. So if you want to use him as an engine, you can. It's only at 3-star though, so I think when the influencers played it.
他说匿名3星的时候。匿名3星的时候，踩到9会有钱，但是我在内测的时候1星就有钱，所以有可能是内测的时候没有调。是帮巴龙夺冠，确实，不过巴龙夺冠有一点点无趣，你们不觉得吗？你们有看世界赛吗？你们不觉得那个巴龙夺冠好像也没有？他那时候访谈就是说，他就是一个就是那个运气不错，就是他就是3支2，然后就确定有巴龙，然后其他人的阵容打不赢巴龙，所以他吃。你不觉得这个有点虽然很刺激啦，可是就那个冠军就巴龙，对，就是那个冠军就是所以河蟹图拿到河蟹地图，所以然后直接拿到9升10，所以巴龙所以吃了，所以世界冠军了，就就好哦，就是他就是有时候那种精彩博弈，我用了很多阵容，心理博弈，然后我过渡的很好，营运的很好，然后转来转去 freeze， 然后吃鸡，很乱。但是就是这种一个河蟹图，然后直接9跳10，然后就开巴龙，然后滴一滴，然后就吃了，然后吃的就是冠军。S9 跑不平衡版本，对啊 ，S16 好玩是因为很多东西可以玩，但是后面改烂了。我必须说 S16 后面其实很 啊，但是每一个赛就是这样子的，所以原本 S16可能我的评价是100分，大概就剩下60分，对我后面的评价。但是至少比那个 S14、S15 0分还好，大概10分，0分到20分。沙哑，但是沙哑很夸张呢，连续10把，6把加5把，连续11把前2呢。
End up being too powerful. So, and then finally Veigar is in a weird spot right now. He's not one of my.
你看 ，Veigar is in a weird spot。摸豆哥对每一个角色都说他是个 weird champion 的 weird spot。我开始觉得这个我不晓得你们前面没有看到他已经讲了15分钟了，大概每2只英雄或是3只有2只，他就说他是个 weird champion weird spot。他每一个角色都说这个角色很奇怪，这什么评价啊？每一个角色的都说这定位很，要么就说这个角色定位很奇怪，要么就是这个角色什么意思
？But he does have a high cap. Again, you'll want replicator, you'll want meeple.
他说他有高上限哦。
Is in a weird spot right now. He's not one of my favorite openers personally, but he does have a high cap. Again, you'll want replicator, you'll want meeple. But as an opener, he ends up being a little weak because of his scaling with those traits.
他说开局的时候比较烂。
Once you get going and you have like 2 items for this guy, he actually does pump out a lot of damage. So
他说会打，那弥补 bonus 是会打旁边的人。
You know, if you have a couple of Veigars, maybe consider like lost streak into convert.
对啊，为什么？我没有要说他的不是，我只是觉得很好奇，说为什么他对每一个角色的评价都是 weird 奇怪的，他对8成的角色的评价都是 weird 的，是什么意思
？Into 3-star, or you know, save the items for someone else like a Nami. But overall, he
还是他自己心里面觉得这个赛季很奇怪，还是他自己。还是他开季的时候已经把他内心话讲出来了，他觉得这些东西就设计的很 weird， 奇怪。
His traits are solid, but yeah. All right, 2 cost.
好，2费咯，也该拿个喝的。weird。2费卡阿卡丽。你看，阿卡丽 is a weird champion。我不是在黑他，对不对？看2费卡第一个又是 weird champion 了，不是他每一个角色就说，你可以说这个角色很强，前进讲，你不能每个角色就跟我说他是个 weird champion， 他是 in a weird spot。他每一个角色就说他是个奇怪英雄，他的定位很奇怪，他的技能很看，我先去看下留言，有没有人讲这件事情？每当摸到说一个英雄就喝一口，然后把它冰凉一下。说 Shut if you hear weird。看每个人很多人都跟我想的一样不是只有我Everything weird, guys. Talking about the weird PBE now. Thanks model。不是我的问题吧？留言有人在喷了，有人在呛了。跟每一个角色都是 weird 的。什么意思？我觉得很奇怪，我也觉得很 weird。他怎么对每个角色都觉得很 weird？
Other melee AD champion, you know, that wants your like your BTs, your Edge of Knights.
好，来看一下阿卡丽要出什么装。阿卡丽 reposition 是什么意思？调整位置去目标去打击最多的敌军，然后丢东西打伤害，然后后续的敌人会伤害比较少。
Marauder gives her some built-in Omnivamp as well. She actually does a surprising amount of damage if you get her like IE. So definitely consider that. Now, it's funny, I just said IE. Don't actually build IE on her, sorry. The reason you don't build IE on her is because her Nova passive is, I think, one of the better ones. It gives your entire team precision.
OK，precision 是新赛季的一个。如果你们看到精准 precision 这个词条的话，新赛季把暴击，就是如果你有精准的词条，你就是会暴击，所以他把暴击会不会暴击啊，什么珠光什么都统一成精准。
Keyword now for spell crit. So IE grants precision, JG grants precision, Jeweled Lotus grants precision. All those effects that we used to just be like, now your spells can crit, is called precision.
技能可以暴击。
Having an Akali on your board means everyone on your team's spells can crit. Now I know that
Lucky
sounds really powerful, it is.
Weaver,
But the thing to note here is
命运编织者，不知道中文，我不知道它繁体怎么
So,
翻。
for example, if you just have like a Corki in the back, where someone, not Corki is a bad example, but I was gonna say Caitlyn. That's even worse example. A Gnar on your board. Gnar only has a 25% crit rate, so you'll want to build crit items to go with the Akali. But if you do it right, much like Vanquisher in the last set, you know, you can run like a Stride Breaker plus a Quicksilver, and then actually have a good amount here with the Akali to provide that spell crit. So, and then as far as her effect goes, her Nova ultimate,
阿卡丽的 Nova 词条 ，Nova 有点像以前的天界或是那个工会，冒险者工会，它会给全队一些效益。那阿卡丽给全队的效益就是精准，代表你的全队都可以暴击。
So pretty good there, but again, really only if you have an Akali 3. And Akali 3, I think what you'll probably see more with Akali 3 anyway is less 5 Nova and more like Marauder plus strong traits and things like that. But she will be pretty strong on PBE. She's definitely someone who can do well. She might fall off in the late game though, but yeah. All right, Belveth. Belveth has
贝尔
3
维
traits,
斯
Challenger, Marauder. So yeah, if you want to go with Akali plus Belveth, you can. Primordian though, Belveth is the third Primordian and the 2-cost Primordian. So the one that really caps Primordian the highest. You know, does a lot of rapid attacks, uses Challenger well. Ginsu's can be good because the total number of slashes does scale with attack speed. So she's a good carry, and like I said, if you're playing reroll Belveth, you're playing Primordian most likely. Primordian's going to scale her up the most. She is kind of that primary carry of Primordian.
就星数越高，战力越强，会给一二费角色。
for Corki
纳
the Meeple
尔
line, but can actually be played reroll as well. Does really well with Ginsu's. You know, pretty common. You want that like Ginsu's IE opener. Like Caitlyn's one of them. Gnar is another one here. Every 5 attacks launches a boomerang that does some bonus damage, which is really good. And if you have like a 3 Meeple 2 Sniper opener, Gnar can be a very good carry, and it's going to PBE probably pretty strong. So definitely consider him as your opener, and there might be some Gnar reroll as well. So.
古纳尔
All right, Gragas.
古拉格斯
a pretty standard 2-cost tank. He's got Brawler, which is good here, but in terms of
蛮
utility,
用。
again, Gragas is, I think, going to be one of the MVPs of this set as far as openers go because he's got Brawler.
MVP 他说酒桶是开局强角色
which we've talked about numerous times here, but also Psionic. Psionic is a very powerful tank in that the 2-piece
鸣人者
basically gives you a bonus item, and that bonus item can be played on anyone. It does not have to be played on a Psionic unit. So for example, if you have like Gragas plus Victor or Gragas plus Pike, all of a sudden you're up an item, which is a very powerful thing, especially in the early game. So I see a lot of like brawler psionic openers, or like I said, if you get like a Victor out of a box, it's a pretty powerful thing to go like channel plus brawler and do some cool things there. So definitely consider that. But like I said, you'll see Gragas on a lot of boards just for that reason.
这样怎么平衡啊？有些角色前期拿到很强。
Gwen
这样会有个问题，有些羁绊跟有些角色前期拿到特别强。那这样就开局如果有这些东西的话，开局如果这些东西的话会太好打脸。
And it's the same like snip and dash. Rogue is really good. Space Groove is fine.
还有说
see Gragas on a lot of boards just for that reason. Gwen is a weird champ this set. I mean,
Gwen is a weird champion this set. 到底是我的问题？还是我的问题吗？为什么我会燥起来？也没有燥起来啊，我会觉得很不专业啊 ，Why？
She's a weird champ every set. It's a lot like set 16 Gwen, but she has Rogue to help keep her alive, and it's the same like snip and dash. Rogue is really good. Space Groove is fine on her. If you have a bunch of AP items for her though, and she gets a bunch of resets, because she's kind of like Katarina from back in the day, where if she gets a kill, she'll jump to the next target and do it again.
看一下哦。他说他如果杀人会跳去另外一个，会再卷一次 ，OK。
And if you can get her to 3-star early, like a worth the wait, Gwen.
我赌过是3星关，可是没有，可是伤害好像还好。
Ends up on the back line and like will melt the back line. She has the same problem a lot of melee champions do, which is she can get stuck on a tank. But if you can get her to dash past that tank, she can do some really cool things. So, just a good AP carry. All right, Jax.
Jax, 贾克斯
nothing gonna blow you out of the water here. He's a tank. He's kind of like Leona from last set, where during his spell he's got some of that flat damage reduction, scales with armor and MR, so a tank. But the thing to note about Jax is if you can get a Jax early, he's kind of like the linchpin of Stargazer. You often have the Twisted Fate, the Talon, but the Jax is the hard part to get Stargazer active. And Stargazer is a trait that if you can play it, definitely is fun to play. It's got these powerful hexes, and each game it changes what it is.
那个 Stargazer 是有点像以前的会有格子，它每一把不一样，它不同的效果。
So I always look at like anytime I see an early Jax, it's like let me check the Stargazer.
到时候
let me see if that's worth going into. Let me see if I have the other units.
有的，这个羁绊倒是有的。
So again, he's got that powerful trait worth playing. All right, Jinx. Jinx is an interesting champion. You're not gonna play her.
进可是就不 weird 的了，是个 interesting champion.
Primary carry too much. In fact, she kind of has this weird thing.
哦，她有 this weird thing.
Where because her spell scales with attack speed a bit, I find her to be pretty bad in the early game, but that's okay because she's Anima. And again, Anima is the lost streak trait of the set. So often what happens is you get a Jinx, you play some Anima, you lose.
Anima 是百兽，百兽是这一赛季的，这个赛季的那个败羁绊。
Jinx 3 with like 3 items has been very, very powerful. So actually she's a beast. Like for a lot of our playtests in the last, get the Jinx 3, and actually she's a beast. Like for a lot of our playtests in the last couple weeks, Jinx 3 with like 3 items has been very, very powerful. So just calling that out though, that like, let's say you start with like a Jinx 2 from Warpath or something. That's not actually the best spot to be in. but she does scale really well. And she's kind of a marksman. She
Scale
wants that
really
attack
well.
speed. That's the other thing too, is don't play her without attack speed. Even though her spell is doing most of her damage, because the spell has an attack speed scaler, you really want attack speed on her. So, all right, Meepsy.
我已经拼很
champion
多
here.
很多阵
A， little Meep
阵容我已经研究很多。
controlling a space golem. Meepsy is very cool. Really, really good traits. Kind of has that curse where because the traits are so good, probably isn't going to be like an overpowered champion by any means. But has Shepherd, the summon, which we talked about.
他的
Has
羁绊
Meeple,
很难组，
which we talked about is kind of like the big vertical, makes her good. And what's interesting is Meeple scales each Meep person in a different way. And Meepsy's scaling is all healing received goes up. So this is where things like Spirit Visage is really
这
good
只
on
角
Meepsy.
色
Spirit
他说
Visage
羁绊太好，
plus
可是这只角色羁绊其
Or
实
if
蛮
someone else on your team has a Gunblade and you want to run Meepsy as a primary tank, you can do some cool stuff there. And then finally, Voyager. Voyager's a lot like Strategist in the past, where your front line gets a shield, your back line gets some damage amp, and then the Voyagers get more. So Voyager also makes her kind of flex in that regard. So like Shepherd Voyager flex between the two is a pretty common thing you can do. So because of that, Meepsy has very valuable traits. So, all right, Milio. Milio is a lot like Ezreal in the sense that like if you have a Milio opener, you're looking for that Timebreaker fast 8. Use that to play well.
米普西怎么组啊？突然想要来组一下。突然想要来组一下米普西，他需要养啊，又需要这个啊，这很难组。他说这个很好组，可是我真觉得，对不对？这个不可能。米普西真没那么好组。他说他的羁绊太好了，但这只羁绊是巨难，我自己觉得这只羁绊是巨难搭起来，怎么样都很难搭。你们脸盲怎么办呢、啊？我们昨天有研究啊，来，我跟你们说一件事情，来，这你们看到了，我那天就在 DC 问大家一件事情，大概是2费的，请问这只角色，请问这是贾克斯，请问他的头。你们看得清楚吗？请问他的头，请问这个图哪里是头，哪里是鼻子，哪里是手？这是一只贾克斯啊，这是一只贾克斯。 然后我那时候想说啊，但是我现在懂，有人跟我说我才懂，这是一个逆命啊。这是一个逆命啊，不是要把戴头套的分清楚，那逆命把他逆命露脸了，你看得出来吗？我看还有谁很奇怪的。哦，这好像艾希哦，你不觉得很像艾希吗？我一直叫艾希，可是他只是凯特琳。最近有时候会认错角色，还是我的问题？这个叫他艾希是我的问题。可能是啊，我没有买过。这个努努我也很难认出来，这很像立山佐，但他是戴安娜，这个可能还。这个那这个是谁？你们知道这个是谁吗？有这个造型，low 打太少了。还有一个造型不是啦，谁会知道？这个不是乌尔加，他就是派克啊，怎么会是酒桶嘞？这个怎么会是酒桶嘞？对不对？来个奇怪的，有些啊，有些要认一下。这要习惯一下。确实，这季有些图没有那么好。对啊，然后我们这个米普西真男主，真低男主啊，不能这样子。主要是我听他说这只角色羁绊太好了，随便组都组得起来。但是我自己在用它的时候，我每次用它，其实它的羁绊其实超级无敌难组。对，勒哈施特。
It won't be something I think we see a lot of unless you get like worth the wait. It's not that he's weak by any means, but it's like you have to have Timebreaker and Fate Weaver, which can sometimes lead you to not have a ton of frontline. But again, if you find yourself with a bunch of Milios, it's kind of the same as not. It's a different skill, but basically it's a lot like last set's Milio as far as itemization.
我觉得这个 Rundown 有个问题。
You want like a J, but basically it's a lot like it's kind of the same as not.
我觉得 Rundown 有个问
If
题
you。find yourself with a bunch of Milios, it's kind of the same as not. It's a different skill, but basically it's a lot like last
会被
set's
误
Milio
导
as far as itemization. You want him casting a bunch. You want like a
他会
J
对角色怎么主阵做评价，但是跟我
on
自己
him.
感
Actually,
觉的
sorry, you
观
don't
点
need
不同。
JG. I haven't explained Fate Weaver yet. Fate Weaver is weird in that Fate Weaver
Fate Weaver is weird。为什么他说他不用暴击？看一下为什么他说不用暴击。哦，因为 Fate Weaver 本身就会
champions
暴击。
inherently have precision, so all of them don't need JG. But again, Fate Weavers have a lower base spell crit than, I mean, everyone has that low spell crit, 25%. So you still want crit items on him to take advantage of it. So Milio's someone you play if you have like a Stride Breaker. or a Nashers. Like Milio's probably the best Nashers user in the set. And then his Fate Weaver thing is like basically every time his ball bounces, there's a chance it'll bounce again and bounce again. And so if you have 2 Fate Weaver in, you're going to get a lot of bounces to make sure you get the highest possible chance it bounces. So he can do a lot of damage at his peak, but that's kind of how he works. All right, Mordekaiser, 2-cost tank. Nothing crazy to write home about here, but he is a Dark Star. He has 3 traits, so you commonly see him enabling channel.
是坦克就说
Channeler gives
nothing
your team that mono regen. This dude's a beast. Like, he's very powerful. You know, if you see a Mordekaiser 2 on stage 2, be scared. I don't think he's like so strong that you're going to see him on like stage 4 boards, but he does feel like one of the best stage 2 openers just because he gives you that Dark Star and Channeler, both of which are quite valuable. Excuse me. And then with the tank items, the Vanguard will also give you a lot of effective health on your board, so that can be really good. All right, Pantheon. Pantheon, I'm saying this a lot, and this is just the way the trait structure works this set, but Pantheon also has insanely good traits, right? 2 Brawler, we've talked about that. 2 Timebreaker, right? Like, the common thing is either the Pantheon Milio or the Pantheon Ezreal Fast 8 to take advantage of that Timebreaker. So you're going to see a lot of that. And then also Replicator. So he just has really good traits. You'll see him on a lot of boards. Pyke. Pyke's a weird one. Pyke is a very...
Pyke is a weird one.
He's psionic, so you'll see him on a lot of boards.
Very weird champion.
Again, he's psionic, so you'll see him
我
on
还
a lot
没
of
睡，
boards.
我睡不着，想到明天要打 set 17，我就很兴奋。我这几天都失眠，我这几天都在组很多，我都在研究 17的阵。
It's like just kind of chilling, and Voyager, so good trade.
We were there out to one head through happened to fire and 哦，他会拉敌人哎，他应该会把敌人拉过来，对吗？
But as far as his spell goes, he's kind of hard to play. He reminds me a lot of Fizz from the last set, where he can end up on backlines, but if he doesn't like kill a key target, he doesn't necessarily do a lot, and he can get targeted and fall off. He does a key target. He doesn't necessarily do a lot, and he can get targeted and fall off. He doesn't have Rogue built in to keep him safe. So he's a weird one. I expect him to be one of the...
我觉得 Modok 是不是对这个赛季有意见？布鲁托安娜，他就一直说每个角色，他是不是其实心里面有点，还是我的解读不对？就假设我一直说这个东西这个东西很奇怪，这东西很怪，这东西怪怪的，这东西很奇怪，这东西我如果对整个，我如果对一个东西每个评价，这个东西很奇怪，这东西怪怪的，是不是我代表？其实我觉得我不太认可。
harder things to play. I wouldn't jump right into like a Pyke game in your first game.
还是英文的解读不是这样子的。
But as people figure out builds and figure out spots to play him, it's not that he's like.
他对于坦克就说这是一个很平常，这是一个没有什么特别的英雄。然后他不是说这个不是没什么特别英雄，这是一个奇怪的英雄。
He's just going to be one of the more narrow lines, just because of the way he works, and so he'll like. He basically what he does is he hooks somebody and then jumps behind them. So if anything, he can be.
他说这个派克没什么用。
He will like displace your corner unit, move them up a hex. But then if you invest in him,
他说这个派克其实就好像没什么用。
Like Fizz used to, and so we'll see.
他的评价就是他没什么用。
If nothing else, playing him for 2 Psionic is worth it. I commonly will play like Gragas, Bruiser, Psionic with a 2 Channeler, and then Pyke goes in at 5. So that you get the psionic item and can put that, stuff like that. So, yeah. All right, Zoe. Zoe's actually pretty strong. Again, Zoe is one of those champions that if you see, Zoe plus Leona, you're like, sweet, let me check the Arbiter. See if it's an Arbiter that works with her. If it is, consider like a reroll Zoe line. If not,
Arbiter 蛮有趣的。
like the LeBlanc. But definitely you want to play her around Arbiter. You can also just play her with Channeler if you have like that Mordekaiser. As an item holder, but yeah, generally some good AP. The big thing with her is because she's a channeler, you're not going to want to put like a Shojin's or a Nashers on her, Because she's a channeler, you're not going to want to put like a Shojin's or a Nashor's on her. You're just going to want to go like full AP and let that spell hit. And then she has some of the best backline access to her damage.
他说这个羁绊就不要做精进那
So she can hit the backline pretty hard. So.
Really? 想一下哦，确实是不一定需要。他的是每秒回目，有3了，然后有20的 from sources。OK.
All right, on to 3 costs. Aurora. Aurora is a weird champ because anima. So if you get an Aurora out of a box, you're like, time to lost streak, right? Is one of the 2/3 costs to get anima going. And then once she stacks up, she can do a lot of damage. From there, you really just have to think of her as like a standard AP user, right? You're going to want the JG. Nashor's Shojin kind of stuff on her, though her traits don't give her a ton of AP, so actually even like a death cap is quite good on Aurora. Aurora will be the kind of champion that like will blow your mind on the damage meters, but won't necessarily win you all the fights, because she will do a bunch of damage and it's all targets hit. So if she hits like one target, she's like a giant 3,000 crit, and you're like, whoa, that's crazy. But she only hit one target, right? And then she has this 80 mana cost, so she does need spell, mana generation pretty heavily. Now, if she's itemless, though, the thing to note here is she debuffs the enemies she hits, and then after a while they take damage. So she can actually be a good.
例如Zope说，这个赛季是个奇遇赛季，然后3个赛季跟6个赛季前都是奇遇赛季。
Supportive unit for like a Voyager comp, for example, play her for that Voyager trait. They take a bunch of damage, and then the true damage pops. So it can actually be a good supportive unit. She's kind of the closest to a supportive unit that we've seen. But again, a 3-star Aurora can definitely pump out the damage.
欧罗拉其实蛮有趣的，欧罗拉的技能，他说。其实欧罗拉是个辅助。
So, okay, Diana. Diana is one of the weirder champions we've made in a while. She's a melee champion.
戴安娜是最 weird 的英雄哦。
We've made in a while. She's a melee champion.
还能更 weird， 到底是有多 weird？
When she casts her spell, she gains a shield, and then 3 orbs start to circle her. Seems fine. The crazy thing is, the higher her attack speed, the faster the orbs go. And you might be thinking, that doesn't sound...
哦，攻速越快，球转得越快。
Too crazy. It's more ticks of her spell, and the way it scales is actually pretty insane. In our testing, like, the difference between a Diana with and without a Ginsu's is like night and day. So like,
咻，哦，确实蛮有趣的。Attack deal bonus.
If you have a Diana, get some attack speed on her, and she is kind of a beast. And then again, she's like the 3rd arbiter here. She's one of the arbiters, by the way, that can do really well with like HP.
哦，我喜欢。
So for
我喜欢戴安娜这角色，酷。
For example, like if your Arbiter effect is every 3 attacks gain permanent HP. All of a sudden you can have like a 5,000-6,000 health.
有这个羁绊哦，仲裁者就是那个可以自定义的羁绊效果。然后他说可以有什么？原来有这个每3下普攻永久增加最大生命，然后让戴安娜啾。
You can have like a 5,000-6,000 health Diana 3 that is doing a ton of damage as well. So, but yeah, she's a cool one, but definitely needs attack speed. Fizz, it's not quite annoying as last set's Fizz, but he's still annoying. He's going to dash around and do some magic damage, and then every third cast.
戴安娜长什么样子？戴安娜长什么样子？赶快，戴安娜，长得很像。2467 ，good。
There's going to be this giant meep shark that appears and does a bunch of AoE damage, and it is a lot of AoE damage. So getting to these third casts matters a lot. If you get Fizz early, rogue openers with him are really good so that, you know, the rogue can drop the aggro, gives him some extra AP, and makes those hit really hard. But really, it's about getting to that third cast. And I've had some fights where this guy will hit like 20,000 damage on the meters just because those third casts hurt. They are really, really big. But he has the same problem a lot of melee champions do, which is if he ever gets targeted, he dies very quickly. So, okay, Alawi is our first 3-cost tank, and I want to talk about something real quick. Is something that has happened over the course of the development is a lot of our 3-cost tanks are actually like pretty powerful. You could even like borderline debate if some of them are like the correct distance between the 4-cost tanks. But what we've found, especially as we've returned to a normal size set, is that having a 3-cost tank be strong has done really good things to the game so that not everyone's just fighting over all the 4-cost tanks. So if you get a 3-cost tank early, consider them quite strong. And Alawi is no difference. Like, even though she's an anima unit, and anima's going to lose, she's also Shepherd, which is good, but she's just really tanky. Like, investing in her, she's hard to kill. She'll drain some health. She'll heal a bunch. She's very tanky. So don't sleep on these tanks. These tanks are actually quite good. I think a lot better than like the 3. Like, she's not quite Darius levels right now, but she reminds me of Darius, where it's like, oh, you face a Alawi 2 on 3/2 with items, and you're like, how do I ever kill this thing? So.
Hey. Dong.
All right, Kaisa. Kaisa is a rogue, but she's still a backliner. She's, you know, an IE, a backline caster kind of thing. But she's kind of like, if you're going to play some rogues, having a backliner that you know will stay alive till the end is usually good. And she can enable 2 Darkstar. So a common thing is like 2 Darkstar, 2 Rogue, play tempo off that and do well. She can do a lot of damage and gets those executes from Darkstar. Otherwise, she's not going to wow you too much, but she can output a lot of damage. All right, Lulu. Lulu is kind of a complicated champion. Not that complicated, but the thing to note here is she's an AP caster, right? So she's going to want, again, your Shojin, Nashers, JG, Deathcap, all that stuff. She is a replicator, so you're going to want 2 replicator active. But the crazy thing here is that her spell slightly changes
露露的
based
技
on
能
the Stargazer.
每一
Now, you don't even
把
have to have Stargazer active. It's just, what is the Stargazer this game? That will change her spell a little bit. So, for example, if it's the Serpent Stargazer, she will also shred a bunch of flat magic resist with her spell. I forget all of them. I don't know them all off the top of my head.
哦，每一把的 Stargazer 哦，每一次的这个羁绊每一把都不一样，所以露露的技能每一把都会
But
小
like, there's
小
one,
变
for
化。
example, that will get gold on kills. There's one that will do a little extra AoE damage. And so you can consider that as just like a nice flavor to check with Lulu. But otherwise, she can do generally pretty good. I mean, literally our final playtest today, I just took second with her with Lulu 3, and it was the Serpent one. That's why I knew that one off the top of my head. Playing her with Replicator with Misfortune, which I'll talk about in a minute. And so, like, there's definitely a lot of cool ways you can play her. But yeah, solid AP carry. Okay, Maokai. Maokai is going to be another popular unit. Maokai has a passive that says he gains more health from all sources. So, and he's a brawler, which gets wild. So if you have a Maokai 3 with like 4 or 6 brawler and a Warmogs, this guy can hit Cho'Gath levels of HP. You can do some pretty wild
他开始
stuff
学
with
会了。
Maokai out of a box into Cosmic Hex can be pretty insane. Hefty Rolls, although I don't think Hefty Rolls is in the set. But there are definitely augments that like give health that like pair really well with Maokai. So definitely consider that. And on top of that, he's a Nova unit. His Nova passive is actually one of the weaker ones. As we hit the higher cost Nova units, their passives get weaker. I believe his is heal a unit, or it's either heal a unit or shield somebody. Yeah, we'll look at it when we get to Nova. But it's not one of the better ones. Now his ultimate, his 5 Nova ultimate, is like the safe choice. If you're running 5 Nova, and maybe like you don't have your Kindred itemized yet, and you want to, play around that, his is like the safest, which is it hits the whole board and stuns them, right? You basically get a board-wide stun by playing 5 Nova. So he's a safe choice if you're looking to do that. His spell itself is actually not that impressive.
石头人如果看到5 Nova 的话，会晕眩全队。
Making him this giant health bar that no one can take down. Maokai is very strong. Okay, Misfortune. Misfortune is
好像姐姐
weird
用之前
in
的
that we
理
have
性
to
可以
talk
切
about
换
her as
形
if she's
态。
3 different units. And in fact, even in our playtest feedback, we would always list her as 3 different units. Because the way she works is she shows up in your shop, it says Gun Goddess, and choose a trait. And when you grab her, she has 3 traits she can play as. Challenger, Channeler, and Replicator. And so basically, whichever one you need, you can make her become that. Her Challenger build, she wants attack speed, right? Which is not shocking. She's like Ginsu's IE. She's always an AD champion in all of these, by the way. So she's not an AP champion. She's always AD. But you have like your Ginsu's IE. She can be a rapid challenger and enable her with things like Diana. She can be a really good backliner, pair with Kindred. So that can work well. Channeler, she's more like an IE Deathblade. You actually, because she's a channeler, you don't really want your Shojins. But she has like a big, like kind of like her ult, but it only hits 2 targets, but it hits them pretty hard. So definitely like that. And then we have Replicator, and this is where you want your Shojin IE. She becomes more of the caster and does this like line spell that can hit pretty hard. So again, the cool twist here is you can build her however you want. She almost always wants IE just for the spell crit. And then the items change based on which class you got. So, cool. All right, and then Ornn. Ornn's going to be tricky. We'll see balance-wise. This guy's scary.
2很奇怪哦，2会有圣光装
and it's a random tank item.
3费
So,
卡
for
会有
example, you
圣
could
光
throw
装
in an Ornn on 2-1, first combat starts, and bam, he has a Warmogs. Okay. Or a Bramble, or a Gargoyle, whatever. If you have 2 items on him, like let's say you already have a Warmogs and a Bramble, he'll make a 3rd item. Okay, cool. If you have 3
如果
items
3件装齐之后，就会变圣
let's say
光
you
装
have。Warmogs, Bramble, Dragonclaw. At the start of combat, one of them becomes radiant. So, you could find, for example, on 3-2, you're facing an Ornn with Radiant Warmog's Bramble Dragonclaw, and it's like, whoa. Now, because of that, much like Maokai, his spell doesn't actually do that much. His spell's pretty weak. But the fact that you can generate an item and he's Bastion, you'll see this guy on a lot of boards just for that reason, right? It's like, you have an Aatrox 2, you find an Ornn, throw it on the board for 2 Bastion, and that Ornn makes a Warmog, so you're like, okay, for me. You know, so this guy can get scary. And then if you have an Ornn 3 who's getting a free Radiant item, like, we've actually had to tune down Radiant, like Dragonclaw and Bramble and stuff like that.
我觉得这个角色问题很大。
So he has a very high cap. Now, like I said, I don't think he's necessarily, like, OP, but because of the way items work, especially stage 2 and 3, if you have an Ornn 2, he can be really tough to take down.
开局的时候有点问题。
And again, like I said, 3-cost tanks are scary this set. Now, we're getting to the last 3-cost tank here, which is Rost.
乐哈斯特自带同
the opposite problem. So Rost is he's a 3-cost tank. That's what he does. Pretty standard spell. He knocks people up. You know, no big deal. Heals. His trait
乐哈斯特的技能是他的羁绊是就跟同级一样。
I actually personally sell him. I actually think he's a terrible opener. His trait says for every non-unique trait you have active, your team gains armor, MR, and attack speed. So basically, for those of you that remember the augment built different, where it's like try to have as many small traits active as you can, it's built different for your team. So, you know, late game, this can get as high as like 20 armor and MR and attack speed. So small traits active as you can. It's built different for your team. So, you know, late game, this can get as high as like 20 armor and MR and attack speed for your team, which can be really good. But the problem is, if you get him on stage 2, you have like 1 trait active. And this also scales with his star level, by the way. It's like 3, 4, 5% per trait. So a Rost on the opener is like, yay, 3 armor and MR, who cares? But I find this guy like, especially this
哦，真的假的？
with his star level, by the way, it's like
哦，乐哈斯特羁绊的效果会跟他的星数有关呢。
On the opener is like, yay, 3 armor and MR, who cares? But I find this guy like, especially this set with the way the traits I told you they're all very valuable. You run like a 2 Brawler, 2 Bastion, 2 Channeler, 3 whatever, you know, couple Voyager, 3 Shepherd, 4 Voyager, whatever. And then like you hit 9 and you throw in a Rost, and it's like a lot of power just being added onto your team. So I find him to be like one of the 3 costs you want to put in on 8 or 9 to get full advantage of that Redeemer if you're playing this kind of comp. So pretty cool there. I expect to see a lot of comps cooked up with him, but his passive, again, like team-wide 20 armor, MR, and attack speed for your team, pretty good. And he's not a weak unit, by the way. Like, he's actually also a solid tank, especially because he's kind of a threat, so he has pretty good base stats. So, all right, Samira. Samira's a weird one going to PBE. I know you're looking at this and thinking, okay, play her in Vertical Space Groove. And that could make sense, but the weird thing about her is she has a passive, and some of you have remembered we've done passives like this before, but basically where anytime an enemy is Samira will shoot them no matter what she's doing. So there's actually like double trouble boards where you could play like 2 Rosts for the knockups. I believe Ornn has a knockup, and then like 2 Samiras in the back, and they can all just like there's a knockup build out there that's possible.
原来是这样子哦。记录一下他说的。双胞胎。
This is an interesting one. She's also just a standard AP caster. You're gonna want your like, you know, your Shojin IE kind of thing.
Shojin IE.
But also you can just go full AD, right? You can just ignore the Shojin and just go like IE Deathblade Giant Slayer, so that passive gets as big of a hit as you can.
对，双胞胎塔利亚的概念。 那就是双胞胎塔利亚。他其实就是塔利亚哎。嘿嘿嘿，嘿嘿，冲冲敲敲敲敲敲。
Recommend you play day 1 of PBE, but as you cook up builds where Samira does well, she'll actually have some really neat stuff. All right, Urgot. Urgot is the first of the mechs that we should talk about. And if you've seen some of the trailers, you probably know already, but mechs are weird in that mechs are either the champion or you
mechs are weird.
You turn them on mech version, and now they are a Colossus-like champion. They take up 2 slots, they're extra powerful, and they count as 2 mecha. So Urgot, for example, can just be normal Urgot, or you can turn him into this like siege tank, and now he has a bunch of extra health, a bunch of extra damage, attacks slower, and counts as 2 mecha. So it's pretty cool. I like mecha a lot. I'll be playing it a lot in my games. Urgot is weird, though, in that he's very feast or famine. If he gets stuck on a tank, this dude will do very little. But if he can like get past them or has some big crits or repositions with his dash, this dude will melt backlines. I have seen Urgots do 10,000 damage on like 3-1 just because they like moved around and got to the backline. This guy has a very high cap. The other recommended guide I'll tell you, by the way, for mechs is if you have 3 items for them, turn them into mechs. If you're gonna play them itemless for their traits, don't. Like that's the simplest way to think about mech. So throwing in an Urgot just for like the Brawler and Marauder, totally viable. But if you do that, I don't recommend turning him into the tank. If you've got 3 items on your Urgot, please turn him into the mech. And I'll talk about it when we get to the trait. But yeah, that's Urgot. And finally, Victor. Victor's a weird champion. His spell.
维克特是一个 weird champion.
Does a lot of damage, but it's very front to back. I find him to be a very good opener.
怎样
Turn them into mechs. If you're gonna play them itemless.
我是重整为了看留言而已。Guys, ever breathing will be a little bit weird. Insert champion is a weird champion. 有一个很好笑，有一句话说 ：“If you told me this was a weird set after making me go to this Haruru。”他说。如果你跟我说这个赛季很奇怪，我会相信的。这个赛季的主题叫做 Weird， 到底在干嘛？我的天哪！哎呦，我们最爱的联盟战旗怎么变成一个怪怪的东西了？啊！Weird dog.
For their traits, don't. Like that's the simplest way to think about mech. So throwing in an Urgot just for like the Brawler and Marauder, totally viable. But if you do that, I don't recommend turning him into the tank. If you've got 3 items on your Urgot, please turn him into the mech. And Victor's a weird champion. His spell does a lot of damage, but it's very front to back. I find him to be a very good opener, specifically for Psionic. He can actually melt tanks before they really come online, but I find late game he's just too slow. So my recommendation here is, again, Victor out of a box. By all means, play him. Victor reroll. I don't think it's quite there yet. So the other thing, again, because he's a channeler, don't necessarily build things like Shojin. Really just go for, like, does he have the psionic item? Mana regen is actually really good. Blue buff is actually really good on channelers. I should have said that earlier. But yeah, so he can do a lot of damage though. JG, like JG Deathcap blue buff, totally viable build. So okay, forecasts.
自备卡喽。
I've got an hour and a half left. I got to get through this in an hour and a half. Okay, Aurelion Sol. This is an interesting one in that he can operate as both. If you have like one leftover item for AP, he sits on the back line, he shoots a beam, does some damage as a standard unit, can help Chandler, totally fine. If you make him the mech though, he becomes that starship that flies around and does damage. And it's interesting because what I found with Aurelion Sol is that he's very strong early. If you get him early, you can win streak like stage 3 and half of stage 1. But late game, because his damage is so spread out, he tends to struggle a little bit. You end up needing like a secondary carry to really help him. But that being said, pretty standard AP items here. You really just want to go like, full damage, which is true of both forms. So just so that those ships are doing as much damage as possible. Deathcap JG, stuff like that. So, cool. All right, Corki. Corki's one of your 4-cost caster backliners. Again, the weird thing here is because he's Fate Weaver, he doesn't need IE. So Corki really benefits from like Stride Breaker plus Deathblade plus like a Giant Slayer or even something like a Quicksilver. So that's pretty cool. Otherwise, again, play him with Meeple, right? You're going to want to play him with 5 Meeple or 7 Meeple. But yeah. Okay,
我现在最有趣的是他的心理，现在他在做这支影片的时候，心理状态到底是什么？很不情愿，很不爽，很多怨言。
Because again, he can be a Colossus unit. So imagine, you got your like Warlock Dragon Claw on a unit that has baseline like
其实我之前听他讲都不会这样子啊，
He can be one of the better tanks.
对不对？之前他 Rundown 做这么多次，他很少抽什么，这个东西很奇怪。这东西他不，之前他的影片都不会这样讲的，为什么突然发生什么事情了？
Is that he's a Voyager unit, and your instinct's going to be like, oh, I'll play him in Voyager. But actually, he doesn't benefit from Voyager that much. Voyager's front line is a flat shield health. And so because he's got like, 3,000-4,000 health, an extra 200-300 shield, who cares, right? But that being said, playing him in mech, like with 4 mech, can do some pretty cool things. I also think he's going to be one of the better emblem holders. If you have like a bruiser emblem on this guy to pair with Urgot, I think that will be insane. But just be aware that, like, don't be baited into thinking that, like, I should play him in Vertical Voyager. You can, by any means. I just don't think it's as amazing. And in fact, if you're playing Vertical Voyager, I find it better to, like, actually have him just be the itemless version so you can have an extra slot. But yeah, otherwise he's an interesting tank, does some big damage. And again, he is one of the more impressive 4-cost tanks. You can flex around. Like, remember I was talking about how Rost works really well, right? Like, play him with 3 mech active, 2 Voyager active, and then get Rost in with a bunch of other traits, and actually he can be pretty insane. So, something to consider. Karma. Karma is your pretty standard big boom 50 mana caster. I know big boom and 50, not quite there, but basically the idea here is, JG, Nashers, get some big crits, shoots 3 targets, big damage, pretty standard AP caster, and the fact that she's Darkstar and Voyager has some good traits as well, but big damage. We find that, like, playing like a Karma plus LeBlanc or a Karma plus Nami builds can be really good as, like, double carries, so those are pretty solid. Kindred. Kindred is going to be your backline Ginsu's user at 4 cost. Pretty standard, shoot, lots of shoots, does some damage, nothing too crazy here. Her Nova passive is one of the weaker ones, which is just, I believe it's heal a champion, so nothing crazy there. But her Nova effect, so this is where, again, if you're playing 5 Nova and you have a Kindred with 3 items, Kindred is probably going to be your common 5 Nova pick. And basically what it does is every time it procs, it'll put one of her marks on people. and it can proc multiple times. Hers is the only one that can proc multiple times. And so it's just going to help her mow things down quicker as you hit those 3 marks to get Wolf to come out and bite. So, yeah, it just basically, she's a good carry, and if you have 5 Nova, it makes her an even better carry. Kind of like how traits do. So, finally, LeBlanc. LeBlanc is a weird one. LeBlanc is our Ginsu's AP user, actually.
我发现一直看英文你是蛮累的。
Gets 40 mana, 5 clones appear, they all shoot some shots, and then she reverts, repeat. Where LeBlanc shines is there are a bunch of arbiter effects that are like every 3 attacks or every 10 instances of damage. And because again, arbiter can be over budget, you know, if you get something like every 10 instances of damage gain 10 AP, all of a sudden you have this like 2 or 3 piece trait that's gaining you like 100 AP over the course of a fight. LeBlanc can really output some damage. So I find LeBlanc to be the kind of carry that you play if the arbiter syncs up really well with her.
攻击越多，每攻击10下加10 AP， 然后勒布朗就可以用在勒布朗身上。
If it doesn't, then I typically try to avoid LeBlanc, but definitely has some pretty high caps. Typically, if the arbiter syncs up really well with her. If it doesn't, then I typically try to avoid the arbiter. So I find LeBlanc to be the kind of carry that you play if the arbiter syncs up really well with her. If it doesn't, then I typically try to avoid LeBlanc, but definitely has some pretty high caps with arbiter there. All right, Master Yi is our AD damage dealer. If you get him early, very good. Again, Psionic, there's some good Psionic items with him, Marauder. But otherwise, you know, reminds me a lot of like Belveth a little bit. Actually, that's not true. Closer maybe even to like, actually I don't know if there's a good comparison last set, but TLDR here is basically he wants to attack fast and he's a melee champion. So even something like Edge of Night Ginsu's plus some damage can be really good here. Every time he I guess Warwick actually. Warwick might be the best comparison. He kind of reminds me a little bit of that like Warwick kind of strength. And so he will do a lot. He will heal a lot with Marauder. Can be tough to take down. So Nami I feel like is like the easiest 4-cost AP to use. She, you know, all you really need to get her operated is 2 Replicator. She doesn't have to be played in Space Groove. 4 Replicators obviously good as well, but like, you know, if you were playing an AP opener early and then transition into a Nami on 4-2, you should be doing all right. Nami's kind of been like our baseline 4-cost, so I expect her to be pretty easy to play and do pretty well. Nunu is the 4-cost CC tank of the set. This dude will be played in a lot of comps. He can enable 3 Stargazer, but basically he drops a snowball where he is, stunning everybody, and then he pushes the snowball, which can go towards backline, and stun them. So with the right stuns, this guy can hit like 6 out of 8 units. He won't hit both backline quarters, but you know, if you thought Swain was popular, Nunu is the same. Now, Nunu doesn't have as good a traits as Swain, so I don't think we'll see, you know, the 4.3 levels of usage that we saw Swain see. But I will say, as someone who plays the set a lot, I put this guy on my board a lot. This guy's very good. Even with just 2 Vanguard, like, you're playing this guy. So, Rammus is probably the strongest, just like baseline tank of the 4-costs, other than the Mighty Mech with Mech enabled. Rammus is really tanky. That's mostly what he does, is just be a tank. But if you have Meeple in, he gets to be even tankier. So pretty standard 4-cost tank. Nothing really much to say.
Lamus 就是一个tank，
kind of like Rom in that regard, where he's very tanky. Okay, Riven. Riven is really interesting. If you liked Riven from set 4, this will remind you of that, but I think actually a lot better. Now, she has a Timebreaker, but you're probably not playing her in Timebreaker that much, unless you have like a reroll Milio and you want to cap that out with Timebreaker. But she herself is not going to be played in like a 4 Timebreaker comp. If anything, if you happen to still have like the Pantheon and the Riven, then you're going to be able to like, okay, cool, I can get like a couple rerolls or XP as I'm going, but it's also stage 4, so it's not that big a deal. The bigger story is that Rogue, like, she'll definitely want like 2 Rogue active, if not more. Rogue's giving her that AD or AP, so she's going to be able to do some damage. But this is where Riven, I think, is really powerful. her passive is that basically whichever one is higher, AD or AP, she will do that type of damage. So if you have a bunch of AD items, great, you have an AP rogue or AD rogue that's doing whatever. If you have AP items, she's an AP damage dealer. So she can use almost any type of item. She is, in my opinion, the best secondary carry in the game. And all you really need to make her valuable is 2 rogue.
雷文有4性伤害，他如果带 AP 装，他就是 AP 伤害；带 AD 装就是 AD。
That's it. And so I love this champion. I think she'll be played on a lot of boards, but she's quite powerful. And even like the 5 rogue Riven can like really output the damage. So Riven's pretty cool, and yeah. All right. Now, normally the 4-cost CC tank is the most popular tank in the game. Tom Kench is going to be able, I think, to beat that. Tom Kench is just a brawler. Like, you have to ignore Oracle for a second. He's just a brawler. He has a decent passive, which makes him tanky. He's not quite as tanky as Rammus, but he is very tanky. He's a 4-cost tank. And so the fact that he activates 2 brawler, obviously good. Oracle, though, is where the value comes in. Tom Kench is the kind of champion that if you high roll on 2-5, you're going to be coasting. This because Oracle is an engine, and what it basically says is every 3 turns, gain something you need. And so what he'll do is he'll give you like a 4-cost of a champion you didn't need, or some extra gold or items, and like he will generate a lot of resources. And so
哦，真的假的？汤肯奇，他说这个汤肯奇，如果你靠赛2之5拿到的时候，你会很爽，因为每3回合给你东西，会有角色或钱或装备。
Very common to just be like, okay, it's late game, throw in a Tom Kench for 2 brawler and free resources. Sweet. Or, hey, I happen to hit 2-star Tom Kench. You can play him in any comp because all I really need is 2 brawler active. So I think you're going to see a lot of this guy. And then finally, Xayah. Xayah is actually one of the harder ones to play. She's the Ginsu's AD user, but she also wants Stargazer. And so she's a little more narrow than some of the other champions we've talked about. But that being said, if you have like 3 Stargazer, 2 Sniper active, and she also likes Ginsu's, by the way, or I think I already said that, but she does have a very high cap. Like going to PBE, unless they nerfed her, like she was like the strongest 4-cost carry. So she can really output the damage. She pairs really well next to Jhin, so it's like you put her and Jhin in the same comp, and it's just like off you go with like 2 Darkstar, 2 Sniper, 3 Stargazer, and she can do a lot. I expect to see her as like, she reminds me a little bit of Yunara, pretty different spell, but really, really high cap and pretty dang strong. So, yeah. Cool.
4倍卡完了，还有5倍卡快完。
Now, one thing to note before I start
哦，我好棒。
all of the other champion number counts, by the way, are like the standards of what you would see in like set 14 or 15, right? Like 14 1 costs, 13 2 costs. The only thing different is that you'll notice there are 10 5 costs instead of the usual 8. Now, it's actually only +1. It's actually only 9. Zed, which we'll talk about in a second, is only available through an augment. But this does mean this set has more 5 costs than usual. So something to keep in mind is that Zed is, so we have more 5 costs, so it'll be a little harder to 2-star them. Only a little.
绑架野怪龙在干嘛？
Okay, gonna try to power through this. Bard. Bard has a couple things going on here that are important. The first one is that he is in Meeple, but he doesn't actually scale with Meeple that well. So don't feel like you need 7 Meeple to play Bard. Bard is actually just really good by himself with 2 Channeler. Okay, so in the past we've had this problem where you can only play these 5 costs if you have their trait active. That's not Bard. Bard is very good outside of Meeple. He does a ton of damage and does not actually scale that well with Meeple, okay? But the weird thing is he's actually very good in Meeple for other Meeples, because what he does is he grants the nearest, I think it's like 2 or 3, I think it's 2, other Meeples +1 Meep, which is their trait. So essentially it's like if you're playing 5 Meeple, having a Bard next to your Corki means the Corki is now like 7 meeple. Or if you're playing 7 meeple, it's closer
Oh,
to like
真的假
higher
的
than 7 meeple. So he powers up other meeples. So that's what makes him good in
哦，原来有
vertical
这个东西，原来是
but
这个
not
意思
himself.
啊
So！if you're playing him as the carry, play him outside of meeple. Okay. Now all of that to say is, what is this
会
spell?
把其他，他会
This
把
spell is
隔
a
壁的
ton of
Meeple
damage. He's
变
like a
强。
big AP. I think he's like the better version of Victor. He just does a ton of damage front to back and he can like melt tanks.
等会我等下
So you
看
want
完
a
这
lot
个，有
of
点
AP
想
on
打
this
一两
guy,
把，
right?
打
Like
完
Death
都
Cap
睡觉。
JG. Blue buff is good for the mono regeneration. But what's cool is if he kills people, there's a chance that he abducts them and makes copies on your bench. And so he can also generate some resources. So does some cool stuff here. And then if you haven't seen it, he can actually use this ability on the Elder Dragons on 5/7 and 6/7 and get
对啊，
copies of
我还没
Elder
睡，
Dragons.
所以我待会要睡觉，睡觉起来半夜，然后
Okay, Blitzcrank.
弄一弄，弄一弄，然后
Blitzcrank's a weird
直
one.
接等
The thing to note
PBE，
here, by the
这
way,
是
is
我的
Blitzcrank,
行程。
not a tank. Do not put tank items on this guy. In fact, if you've been playing the last set, the closer person to compare him to is Set.
物理只是像赛特一样，
JG
倒了会回满血，
plus
再起来。
BT or something like that. Maybe not even BT, because his passive works a lot like Set. The way it works is he has a health bar, and then when that health bar goes to 0, he's gonna like disengage. Now, unlike Set, he doesn't run away. He just
可是
disengages
他的
right
羁
where
绊
he
跟
is.
那个很
And
不，
that can cause some weird pathing things.
他是
that
先锋
can
腿，他
frustrate
是你想想看，
but then
先锋跟
gets
赛
his
特
health
是
back
不
to
是不同？
full, and then he comes back, and he's back again, but now with even more damage. This dude can crank out a lot of damage, so don't make the mistake of trying to play him like a tank. He's closer to Set. Okay, AP items, very good. 2 health bars, doesn't really need Space Groove, doesn't really need Vanguard. This dude's just a beast. So, Fiora. Fiora is a lot like the powered up version of Master Yi in this set. You want AD items on him, does a lot of AD. The Divine Duelist here is going to do a bunch of damage. And the other thing is it's going to allow you to heal back up, which is pretty solid. So that is a good thing. But otherwise, Fiora is a good way to cap out, your AD line if you hit her early. She also has that thing where if she ever gets down to a one-on-one with any other unit, she will instantly win the fight. So that's pretty cool. So she could be good at, like, for example, beating a big Cho'Gath that you're having trouble killing.
丢拉 1v1 的时候可以直接斩杀。
Yeah.
所以是不是对方如果
Okay,
放
now
一
this is
只
where I
5费
wish I
卡，
had a big slide
我们就
ready
放一
to
只
go
菲欧拉把它
because
杀
I
了
wish I could talk about this longer. Graves is going to melt your brain, and I wish I had more info ready for you to go here. Maybe I'll try to make a separate post on Twitter later. Hopefully other sites also help me with this. I was joking with Froden that TFT Academy is going to love this guy. Graves is probably the most complicated champion we've ever made because you essentially have a giant talent tree built into a champion. The way it works is you're going to play him, and every
对，
time
孵
you
放
play
每
him,
每几回
you're
就
gonna
会
get
有一个
like
加
4
强，
choices, and this will
自
dictate
选
is
一
he
个加
ranged
强。
or melee, and then if based on that, is he gonna do extra damage from afar, or shred armor, or double attacks, or whatever?
这
And
只
you can
角
like
色也是我
fully
觉得这季
customize
有
your
点靠
Graves.
赛的角色，
And each time
有
you
点
make
像
a
蓝
choice,
宝。
there will be a couple turns where like it'll start delaying a little bit, but
可是
the
他
point
他
is
是一
like
个
if you ever
单，
see a
他是一个
Graves
强力
with
单
like
卡，
6
蓝
or
宝
7
是一
upgrades,
个前排。
be scared. Some people were comparing him to Rumble
但
in set 13, and I think that's an
至少我
okay
在内测
comparison,
前
except that
一
like
开始很早
it
拿到
is
他，他就一
impossible
个人
to
把
get
全部
all
杀
of
光
Graves
了。
upgrades because some of them also have like they can upgrade themselves, right? Where it's like shotgun and then shotgun plus and shotgun plus plus. This guy is going to take a while to learn, but the TLDR here, if you're looking for the short version, is he can be backline with like Ginsu's, or he can be frontline with like, Titans and stuff like that. And then from there, pick the utility and extra power you want on him to make him into the carry you need him to be.
就很像，
So Graves will have a lot.
就很像你还记得世界赛的时候，沙哑3-2拿到阿奇尔，这个3-2拿到葛雷夫，然后葛雷夫没几回合成长一次世界冠军了，
Going on. I expect this guy to melt some brains for a while.
有点问题。
All right, Jin. Jin, 2 Dark Star, again, very valuable. Eradicator, it's going to
感觉这种角色呢，就得8等才
so
能
he's
拿
good to
到
just。throw in anyway. And then if you have items for him, this guy just pumps out a lot of damage. This guy loves IE. His spell is where most of his damage is. After that, you can put whatever items you want on him, but this guy just does a lot of front-to-back damage. He melts tanks. He's a very powerful carry. Once you
这种角色3+2拿到过分。
Or just play around Jin himself if you get him
无
early.
敌耶，我只能说无敌
A lot of damage. All right, Morgana. Morgana is basically, so Dark Lady gives an aura where it's like, I think it's damage amp and damage reduction based on which form she's in. So
有些角色不能7等拿到啊，不能3+2拿到啊，3+2拿到会出事。
And much like Blitzcrank, you want AP items on her. She's kind of a drain tank. But the damage she does heals her and makes her shield bigger. So you want lots of AP on Morgana. But a good example might be like Deathcap JGBT would be a totally viable build on Morgana. I'm sure we'll find better builds later. But yeah, she is another one of those champions that you can just kind of throw into any comp for the aura. And if you have the AP items, good stuff. Shen. Shen, again, not a tank. Just like Blitzcrank, it says Bastion. He's not a tank. He's actually a Ginsu's user. You want him to do a bunch of attack speed. And what it is basically...
哦，对啊，95很多都可以单挂，有格雷夫、维可斯，然后摩甘娜。 然后像圣其实是堡垒，所以只是拿到手边上，因为堡垒太好上。
Because his slow, I believe, is 40%. It's like a 40% slow. So getting that out there can be good. And then in addition, he also has this cool sword that you can place that gives people inside of it a bonus shield at the start of combat and some bonus attack. So I find Shen to be the kind of champion, even without items. He activates
这些5倍感都好好用。
sword for the backline attack speed, so just a lot of utility.
我在组常规阵容的时候遇到一个问题，
Sona
如果低到这些5倍卡都可以上那种
Premier 5 cost. You play her often for Shepherd. You play her often for 2 Psionic. Again, we talked about how you play like a Gragas Tom Kench for Brawler, and then with the Gragas you have the Sona for Psionic, and you're getting that extra item. And then all of that to say is she's an AP caster, so you want the JG, Deathcap, all that stuff. But she also has Commander, and what Commander does is you'll get this command that's essentially like a mod for a champion.
唢呐很忙，唢呐每2回合就会，唢呐会给一个改造，但每2回合换一次。
Okay, cool. You can put that on somebody and be up an item. Another example is every 2 seconds you're alive, gain XP. And it's like, okay, cool. I put this on a backliner and I'm gaining 10, 12 XP a turn. Great. Or your spells and auto
真的假的啦？骗人哦！它的改造会有什么每2秒得到经验？真的假的啦？因为他说1回合。
Great. Or your spells and auto attacks now chill, stun, and burn and stuff.
他是不是乱讲啊？他说唢呐有些改造1回合可以给你10经验、12经验。拿到唢呐，他就可能1回合给你10经验、12经验，真的假的啦？
There's a bunch of cool commands, and so having those commands on top of Sona, on top
可以这样啊？
ends up making her very valuable. I put
1回合10块钱。
I can personally.
那我3+2拿到唢呐。
Vex is a weird one. Vex is a Ginsu's user.
然后打很久。
She's going to want to do a lot of attacks really, really quick. She ramps up. But what's really interesting about Vex is Doomer. Doomer says the first time I hit an enemy, steal a percentage of their AD and AP. Not lower, steal. So you could have a champion who has a baseline 50 AD. You can knock that down to 30, and Vex is stealing that in AP. And so as Vex hits more and more of the team, her AP will build up. So she not only raises her own damage, but lowers theirs. And
为什么50可以变30啊？
You can knock that down to 30, and Vex is stealing. Who has
骗人，明明就扣8而已。
You can knock that down to 30, and Vex is stealing that in AP. And so as Vex hits more and more of the team,
有优势吗？野怪会变，野怪闪电会变
not only
铁
raises her own damage, but lowers theirs, and can do that. So even just throwing her in just to proc the Doomer on people can be really good, but also has a very high cap. And then finally Zed. Now Zed is only available through a 3-2 augment, but what Zed is like the old set 2 Zed, where he makes clones and the clones make clones and the clones make clones, and you can end up in a weird board state. Now, this guy's scary. And I will tell you, his item build is not the most intuitive, okay? The first thing I'm going to tell you is he needs
没有啊，我
Edge of
角
Knight.
色
And
技能
yes,
这
the
个
way
就
it
有了，我
works
在
is if
听
his
他
Edge
怎
of
么
Knight
说而已
hasn't。procced yet, the clones have an unprocced Edge of Knight. If it has procced, the clones have a procced Edge of Knight. So what you want to do is like try to make as many clones as you can before Edge of Knight procs. So Edge of Knight's very good. The same is true, hilariously enough, of Bloodthirster. And so my personal build I have found to be good is Edge of Knight, Bloodthirster, Shojin, which sounds weird, but the entire idea of this champion is make as many clones as you can before Edge of Knight procs. What you want to do is like, if it hasn't procced yet, and I will tell you, his item build is not the most intuitive. Okay, what Zed is like the old set 2 Zed, where he makes clones and the clones make clones and the clones make clones, and you can end up in a weird board state. Now, this guy's scary. And I will tell you, his item build is not the most intuitive, okay?
原来是这
The
样
first
子。
thing I'm going to tell you is he needs Edge of Knight. And yes, the way it works is if his Edge of Knight hasn't procced yet, the clones have an unprocced Edge of Knight. If it has procced, the clones have a procced Edge of Knight. So what you want to do is like try to make as many clones as you can before
不知道
Edge
AI
of
能
Knight
不能
procs.
找到我
So
想要
Edge of
看
Knight's very good. The same is true, hilariously enough, of Bloodthirster. And so my personal build I have found to be good is Edge of Knight, Bloodthirster, Shojin, which sounds weird, but the entire idea of this champion is make as many clones as you can to overwhelm them, and between the Edge of Knight procs, BTs, and health of the clones, your backline can win the fight. You do not put damage on this guy. It's very weird in that regard. So we'll see what kind of builds you guys come up with. But just calling it out here, like when this guy snowballs, it feels crazy. So cool. There you go. There's the champions. Let's try to get through traits. I have an hour.
Oh.
I've got to get through all this in an
看他才讲完，他现在要讲 traits。
hour. Holy crap. All right. I might not be able to talk as much. Okay. Anima Squad. Anima Squad is the lost streak trait. You play the 3-piece.
可是
If you have this on 2
我
or 2,
可是你知道吗？这一定要听，因为很多东西是他没有写上去，他用讲的。
because the way it works is every loss gets more and more and more and more points. You're trying. The ideal state is you get it in on 2-1, get up to about a 500 cash out is a solid good win. A 600 cash out is like you're probably going to win the game, and if you somehow get higher than that, you're probably going to super win the game. 700, 800 starts to do some wild things. What's interesting about Anima Squad is the rewards are always units and
安妮玛百兽，对啊，有玩啊，但是我都开少少，
This is what it's modeled off of. The
开个
Anima Squad
100的
items
里
can
面
be played
几
on
个都
any
能
button.
走。
They do not have to be played on Anima Squad units. So you can play 3 Anima, maybe get to like, for example, 300, take +1 item and a little gold, and then completely pivot out to a completely different comp. Now, if you get an Anima Squad emblem, you should consider looking at the 6-piece late game. The 6-piece is one of those, like, every time you win, just get extra stuff. Feels pretty good. Awesome. But yeah, otherwise, I will say it's like not one of our most innovative, lost streak traits. It's pretty standard.
真的很夸张，他每一个都是 weird。
Can you get up to that 11 loss?
我觉得他，
and get a ton of points.
我觉得他是不喜欢这个赛季。
In Soraka games, we'll talk about
然后确实有点没有睡觉，所以讲话就跟我一样。我很久没睡觉的时候，我就一直重复，一句话，就是我的词汇量会巨幅降低。
Usually good. So anytime it's a Soraka game, I'm looking for an Anima opener if I can. So, all right. Arbiter. We talked about Arbiter a little bit, but basically it's a lot like the old admin where there's going to be a menu that pops up. There will be causes and effects. And the way to look at it is there's really 2 types, okay? There's resource generation. So you could play Arbiter for something like, hey, for every star level or Arbiter, have a chance to gain some rerolls. And use that to bank up some rerolls and then pivot to another comp. Or
有经济类的跟有资源类的跟战力类的，这个 arbiter。
Okay, great. Use that, make 3 Leona, pivot out. So there's the resource generation arbiters, and then there's the like actual combat stat arbiters. And usually those are designed around one specific unit. So it's like every 10 instances of damage, gain AP. Okay, that's a LeBlanc one. LeBlanc's the one doing tons of instances of damage. or every 3 auto attacks do something. Every 3 auto attacks gain health. Okay, well that's Diana, because LeBlanc doesn't really need the health, so that's a Diana game. Great. And you can look at it like that to try to figure out how to make your Arbiter work. So, cool. All right, we talked about Bulwark, as you can see there, shield and
这有点像
attack speed
皮啊，
for
看到
Shen.
哪来选项？
Commander, we talked about with Sona. Those are those mods that are really good. Yeah, Dark Lady, like I said, 5% DR or 10% while Morgana is in dark form. That's during her spell. So you can do that. Dark Star, like I said, 2-piece Dark Star, super valuable because it's just 10% execute on the entire enemy team. 2 Dark Star is something I try to get in every comp I can. It's very good. 4-piece is really basic. It's just the team gains 30 armor and MR, the Dark Stars. And then the 6-piece is weird, where 1 unit, whoever your strongest
Leo
unit
is
is,
weird.
that doubles. It becomes like 60 AD and AP. And you get these 2 black holes that their health is based on the rest of your Dark Star. So for example, if you go like Cho'Gath reroll, make this big Cho'Gath, then get to 6 Dark Star, those 2 black holes will also have a ton of health, and you can go really, really cool there. So, and then Dark Star Prismatic is a 9, which means you can actually do it at level 9, not level 10, but it does require 3 emblems, and there aren't a lot of great ways to get emblems, so something to consider there. All right, Fiora's, like we talked about, Divine Duelist. This is you heal for 15% of the damage you deal. So that's, like I said, if you're low with Anima Squad and then you get Fiora, you can heal back up if you start winning fights, which is pretty cool. Doomer, like I said, you steal their AD and AP when you hit them, which is great. Eradicator, talked about that, the 14% less armor and MR. Factory New, that's the talent tree thing. Every 3 upgrades, future upgrades will take an additional round. Zed, like we talked about, makes clones, pretty simple. Misfortune, choose the trait. Okay, Mecha. I talked about Mecha already, where you can basically run 2, 4, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 based on which ones are cost 2. The thing I'll call out is that the way Mecha, in my opinion, gets played is you either play it where it's like you have the Urgot early, play around him as a mech, and then find the Mighty Mech, play with them as your tank, and then later find the Aurelian Soul, and you're like, okay, cool. If I only play 6 basically if I have items for all 3. Okay? If I don't have items for all 3, my recommendation is you only play 4. Even though the 6, it feels like it's powerful, where you're like, oh, free, +1 size. It's almost not even worth it. And so, like, if I'm playing around Aurelian Soul tank and Mighty Mech frontline, I'll just ditch the Urgot. Or vice versa, size, it's almost not even worth it. And so, like, if I'm playing around Aurelian Soul tank and Mighty Mech frontline, I'll just ditch the Urgot. Or vice versa, if I'm playing around Aurelian Soul carry and Brawler frontline, maybe I keep Urgot with no items and only play 3 mech, and I don't even worry about the Mighty Mech, right? So it's like, it's an interesting thing where there's a lot of ways to play it, but don't be baited into thinking you have to play this 6, because I actually think unless you really have good items for all 3, that is a bait. So, okay, Meeple. This says 2%. This is wrong. For those of you that remember Battle Academia, that's the way Meeple works. It's basically there's a modifier to each Meeple, and so each
3只就可以有6只。他说不值得。啊，好想要玩机甲。
Pretty interesting. But the big thing to talk about with Meeple is the 3 and the 5 are basic, you know, health and that amp power up. But the 7 actually gives you a cloning hex where you can start to clone units, much like Hui in set 11 with Artist. And you can start cloning units, and you also get a little bonus gold when you do that cloning. Froden was telling me he had a really fun game where he had worth the wait Poppy, then hit 7 Meeple early, then used the hex to start making even more Poppies, and eventually hit 4-star Poppy very, very early. You know, like you can do stuff like that. And so 7
哦，7米普可以来印一费卡变3星。
Really good. So definitely play around that. And then if you hit the 10-piece, you get these 4 Meep Lords, which are adorable.
他说他觉得不值得，除非你都有装备。
So pretty cool. Nova, like I said, if you have at least 2, you get these effects.
可是谁会开到7米普
Caitlyn's the attack speed, Akali's the precision. All of those are good. Maokai is allies heals for 15% max health. It's okay. And then Kindred is shield the strongest tank for 800. it's okay. It's fine. Late game, it's actually not that great, but really you're just playing around Kindred. So, and then there is actually an emblem, which is kind of cool. But emblem says allies deal 10% bonus true damage. Now again, the thing to remember here is this is not just Nova units. This is the whole
二阶段
team.
嫖进爪，起
So
步无
do
敌。
that. And then if you have 5, you gain that selector. Now the selector can be, so do remember here is this is not just Nova units. This is deal 10% bonus true damage. Now again, the thing to remember here is this is not just Nova units. This is the whole team. So do that. And then if you have 5, you gain that selector. Now the selector can be overwhelming, but the basic rule is if you have a 3-item thing, put the selector on that. It's probably your carry. If you don't have that, put it on Maokai. Maokai is your safe go-to board-wide stun. Take it.
Noma 转 ，Noma
Party
转，
animal, that's
能
Blitzcrank.
不能无脑拿？一来有10 stack bonus true damage。Nova 转就是全队加10%增伤。
This is basically the set mechanic where when he gets low,
Low
comes
bar.
back.
5 low。
Primordian, like I said, Primordian is just extra damage based on their star level. But, and this is the weird thing about Primordian, is when you have the 3
Weird thing.
every round you gain a random 1 or 2 cost champion. And so this is where, like I said, you can actually play Primordian as an opener with some econ into Fast 8, right? You don't have to play it as a reroll comp. You can, and it's good, but don't feel like it's the only way to play it. I've definitely had some Fast 8 Primordian games that I'm pretty happy with. Oracle, like I talked about, that's Tom Kench. Every 3 rounds gains a reward. Psionic, this is gain items. And the thing to note here is the 2-piece, very valuable. You gain an item, can be put on anyone. The 4-piece is gain a second item, which is still good. The 4-piece, though, is where you start wanting to go, okay, it should actually be Psionic carries, because the items gain an extra effect on Psionic units at 4. Now, a common thing I've seen, for example, is like you play 4 Psionic, you put the AP carry item on like Sona, and then you put the tank item not on Gragas, even though it would give you the extra effect, but just put it on like your Tom Kench. You know, and so there's some cleverness you can do here. Don't be baited into feeling like you have to put the tank item on Gragas because he's Psionic, for example. So some cool things you can do there. But again, 2 Psionic, very valuable. Redeemer, as we talked about, extra AD and armor or attack speed, armor and MR for each trade active. Love that.
这样子，热哈
Space
斯
Group,
特
this
赌
one's
3
really
差很
weird.
多，
This is a very creative trait, but
也没有差很
basically
多啊，差1%，
every
7
Space
个
Group
羁绊就
champion
差
is either
7
in the
双
groove
防
or not.
跟
When
7
they're
攻
in the
速。
groove,
但是如果可以3就蛮爽。
they gain attack speed and health regen, and that number is based on how many space grooves you have. So for example, if you have like 7 space groove in, that number can be like 80% attack speed and 4% health
低
regen.
太空也太烂了。
Now, what determines if they're in the groove or not changes for each champion, right? So for example, with Teemo, it's if I have 5 stacks of my dot on them, I'm in the groove. Or I can't remember all of them, but they each have their own thing which puts them in the groove or not. And for example, the 3-piece says they all start in the groove for 3 seconds, which can actually be really insane. Like if you're running 7, it's, hey, at the start of combat, all your space groove gain 80% attack speed. It's like, whoa, okay. But yeah, and the other weird thing about space groove to call out here, what you can do as a trick, is this does not say unique space groove. So for example, if you have an opener that's like 2 Nasus's, 2 Teemos, and a Gwen, it only has 3 space groove, but it's actually giving you 5 space groove
啊，
units
真的
of
假
attack
的啦？
and health regen.
你们有人看得懂那句话吗？这个羁绊是可以帮一样角色来开高的啊？啊？那我10人口，屁啦！但我10等放10只，不就开到10了吗？真的假的？
So something to consider there with Space Groove is you can do some tricks like it's Double Trouble. So, okay, Stargazer. I'm not going to go over each one of these too much, but basically, much like some of our Ionias and Mutants of the past, every game it's different.
我们要攻速会算5个人的。
Okay.
没有啊，人越多攻速不会越快啊。
Okay, Stargazer.
我懂了。原来你的意思是这样。
Something to consider there is units of attack speed and health regen. So something to consider there with Space Groove is
那不是啦，那是他我错了。
So
是他的第一条的被动，人越多，他的攻速跟回血加越。
Much like some of our Ionias and mutants of the past, every game it's different.
对，你说的对。
Every game that will change the hex formation.
这种说那也太奇怪了。
And the breakpoints, right? So you get some simple ones, for example, like Stargazer, and the other way Stargazer works.
我那天拿到了很多这个转。可是我没有人口，我开不了11。
And Stargazers a lot more, right? So let's take Serpent.
这里只有6个人，然后我拿到4个转，然后我10等，我好像拿到4、5个转，都10等。可是我还是开不了11，因为我没有多人口。
They do their damage as poison damage.
我想要
11， so for example, in today's playtest,
要11人口加5个转。
And Lulu was doing 30% extra damage as poison damage.
这个11要11人口加5个转。
That's everything.
我达到了。
So other ones, for example, are Huntress.
5个一样的转加11人口。
And heals your team. This is good for like Zaya.
我那天差1个。
But there's also some really weird ones in Stargazer. The Mountain is going to be a very popular one. Okay. The Mountain, for example, is every 5-player combat, you just gain a Stargazer emblem. And so the idea here is with the Mountain, you're building up the mountain until eventually you can actually hit like 11 Stargazer and do some crazy stuff. So that's a pretty unique version. The Altar is actually only ever a 3. It can't go higher than 3. But as you kill units and things die, you sacrifice and build up to a level where it becomes more powerful in the late game. Pretty neat.
给徽章
or the medallion, which again can only ever be a 3-piece.
说任何徽章应该算一
allies in
个
the hex gain for each 3-star on your team. So this is one where it's like encouraging you to find a reroll line that you can pair well. So you could go like Primordian Stargazer and do some cool stuff there. The Fountain is a mana regen one, but it never really pushes you past 5. And then finally, we have the Boar, which is kind of like the Ionia Gold one, where it's basically you can generate some gold if you win the combat and try to snowball with the Boar. So, and again, each formation is different, pretty cool. Finally, Timebreaker, we have the 2-piece, which, like I said, when you lose, gain a reroll. When you win, gain an XP core that you can sell.
But
the 3-piece, you give your whole team 15% attack speed, so you can even go like, Riven plus Pantheon plus Milio and go 3 Timebreaker to give some extra attack speed. I don't usually find that worth it, but you can. And then the 4 pieces, they gain an additional 50%. This is where, again, like for Ezreal reroll, I think Ezreal reroll 4 Timebreaker is really good. So, all right, now I'm going to go fast through the classes here. Bastion, Armor and MR, 2-piece is a good team-wide aura. Seems pretty good. Brawler, you're going to see a lot of Brawler. The only thing to call out here is the start, the 2-piece isn't flat. It's just percent. So that's changed, but otherwise Brawler is percent health like it has been. Challenger is they gain some attack speed. When the target dies, they dash and gain a burst of more for a little bit here. So Challengers are definitely very snowbally. Channeler. This one's interesting. Channelers gain 20% additional mana from all sources. So this is why I was saying like blue buff is really good on channelers. But you can go Shojin. The only reason I don't like Shojin is because as they channel their spell, you're not taking advantage of the thing like Shojin. But basically you get mana regen for your team and even more for the channelers. So for example, if you're running 4 channeler, your channelers are getting 6 mana regen, which is pretty good. So, yeah. Okay, Fate Weavers. This is one of the complicated ones. So again, Fate Weavers have innate precision. Even at 1, you do not need 2 for this. This is a little confusing. So Caitlyn, Twisted Fate, Corki, and Milio do not need IEJG. They have built-in precision. Okay. Now, the 2-piece is any chance effects on their abilities. So for example, we talked about how Twisted Fate picked those cards. They'll be lucky. they're more likely to hit, things like that. So that makes them a little better. And then the
不
4
用
pieces
开
they gain extra crit chance and crit damage. So 4 better.
这到底是什么意思 ？Critical strikes are also lucky.
A 4-piece Twisted Fate 3, for example, is likely to roll higher numbers and hit really hard. I find 4 Fate Weaver to be something that you only play early and then you go back down to 2. But 2, very commonly, it's really good to play. So I find extra crit hit, how Twisted Fate pick those cards, they'll be lucky. They're more likely to hit, things like that, so that makes them a little better. And then the 4 pieces, they gain extra crit chance and crit damage. So a 4-piece Twisted Fate 3, for example, is likely to roll higher numbers and hit really hard. I find 4 Fate Weaver to be something that you only play early and then you go back down to 2. But 2 very
没有啊，2的话就是这个最后一行什么意思 ？Critical strikes are also lucky。其实我玩的时候我不懂，我一直不懂4到底有什么用。
So a common case where I'll play 4 is if I'm playing like Milio reroll or Twisted Fate reroll and find an early Corki, and then my front line. But later I'll have to like supplement more front line, for example. Marauder is interesting in that it gives your team 5% Omnivamp. So 2 Marauder, pretty good to throw in for just that. But then in addition, the Marauders gain even more Omnivamp and AD, as they're all AD champions. Replicators, as we talked about, basically their spell casts a second time instantly. It's instant, so they don't lose any damage. So for example,
2就会啦。
a meteor, but instead there will be a second meteor, and that second meteor is at like 25% or 50% strength.
Also lucky. 就是会。就是你的暴击可以爆2次，就是2次如果有才会爆，是不是啊？这个意思吗？这一行是写在4还是不是写在4的？这一句话意思是暴击可以判断2次，是不是？哦。So ga， 我懂了，就是他可以爆，他如果2次，反正2次有一次爆就会爆了。那这样子爆率其实就不用撑很高了。他还是可以撑高，但是撑高就不一定要撑那么高了。这个是4才有的嘛？看一下。看他写的怎么样 ？Weaver， 对，这个是写在4上面的。Lucky 他要写啦。Trigger twice and tell a better outcome。他要写。那如果没有开嘞，就是1次。那所以那这样以数学来说怎么算？我还真没学过这个数学。假设30%，那2次的话是原本30%，那2次是变几%？1减掉2次都没有，1减掉0.7乘以0.7，7749。7749，所以如果是30%， 2次就是51%，就是1减掉不爆的51%，30加7 31。你的算法跟我的算法一样，那是一样的，对，那我们2个算法都是51%。OK， 所以，那你。 那确实你那个比较简单啊，也可以啦。那50%呢？一减掉50%就变75%，10%就变成19%，99%11。20%8864，36%。OK，I got it.
AP on 5 units that also have built-in Edge of Night. Not bad. Not bad. So definitely an interesting spin on the assassin type. Definitely let us know what you think of Rogue. All right, Shepherd. Like I said, we haven't done this in a long time, but the summon trait is on the classes, not the origins. But basically, 3-piece is a summon, and it's one of those things where like you can't itemize it. But the 3-piece, the thing to note about the summon is it's a health bar, and it will also give your team some AP, which is good. Cool. The 5-piece, it'll actually do some damage as well. And then if you have an emblem, it does require an emblem. You can get up to the 7-piece, and the 7-piece is where it's like, okay, I'm playing a Shepherd comp. This is really good. There's definitely a lot of cool things you can do with 3 and 5, but 7 will feel like a Shepherd comp. So definitely check that out. Sniper, pretty standard. Do extra damage based on how far away they are. Vanguard, pretty standard as well. Gain shields when they get low, gain another shield. Pretty cool. And then Voyager, as I described, your tanks and fighters gain a shield for 15 seconds. Your other damage amp, Voyagers gain double. So again, kind of that flex strategist kind of thing.
基本讲完了，还有20分钟啊。
Okay, there are champs and traits. I probably talked too long. There are 2 more things we should talk about, the mechanic and augments. I'm going to try to go through this quick. First, let's talk about the mechanic, okay? So, the mechanic, the way it works is at the start of the game, you are going to see 2 gods, okay? So let's say for the first game, we see Ahri and Aurelion Sol, okay? And it'll tell you, it's an Ahri game and an Aurelion Sol game. Okay, great. Easy enough. Then when you get to this first carousel in stage 2, it's gone, and instead replaced with the Realm of the Gods. At which point, you'll get one of Ahri's stage 2 choices, and one of Aurelion Sol's stage 2 choices as your 2 options, each with a component. So let me give you an example. You might have to choose between either 8 XP and a bow, or when you reach 50 gold, gain a component and 4 gold, plus a sword. Okay? And so you have to look at those and decide based on your position which one you want to take. So like, do you just want the 8 XP right now and like be aggressive? Or maybe you're on a lost streak with 30 gold and you're like, well, I'll hit 50 gold soon. So you take, let's say you take Aurelion Sol. And obviously you're going to have to weigh the items that come with them. Now the items that come with them are not the same for every player. They're actually pulling from your item bag. So hopefully it's more likely to give you items that you kind of need already. But you know, that might make your decision, right? And Nico, for example, when he plays, very commonly is just like, I just pick the item component I need and I don't worry too much about the god effect. But you can go either way. And so you'll have to make a decision. So let's say you pick Aurelion Sol. And what that does is that's going to give you a single Aurelion Sol stamp. Okay, so you've aligned with Aurelion Sol for stage 2. Great. Game keeps playing out. You get to stage 3. On stage 3, we make another choice. And so maybe this time it's 8 gold plus a rod, or starve a unit to get 10 gold and a armor. Okay? And you're like, well, I've already kind of hit my pairs. I'm not going to starve anything soon. Just give me the 8 gold now. And I need the rod. So you pick Ahri. So now you have an Aurelion Sol stamp and an Ahri stamp, which means you've aligned with each god once. Let's say you pick Aurelion Sol. Well, now you'd be aligned with Aurelion Sol. Okay? And this will matter on 4-7. We do this one more time on stage 4's carousel. So stage 4, now Aurelion Sol only has 1 right now, which is reach level 9 to get 20 gold, but maybe you're playing reroll. And so the choices are actually 8 rerolls or reach level 9 to get 20 gold. You're like, well, I'm playing reroll, just give me the rerolls. So now you went Aurelion Sol, Ahri, Ahri. Okay, cool. Then on 4-7, because you chose Ahri twice, you've aligned with Ahri. And what you're going to see is a treasure dragon-like armory where you can roll like 3 components, and you are going to get a 4th augment, which is Ahri's augment. And this is actually out of date. This is actually enough 6 gold. If 4 other players take this, gain an additional gold. And so there's actually this aspect of like how many other people are going to take it. Now we've actually changed it since the influencer playtest also, where you get more gold. And that you can play with, like, cool. Echo is the god of time. The general idea is he brings back things from the past or makes you wait for things. So generally his offerings will be a little more powerful, but you have to wait for them. For example, you know, an artifact in 8 rounds on stage 2. Okay, that doesn't mean you're playing down like the 8 gold that Ahri could have given you, but later you're going to get something really powerful. I actually really like this one. On stage 2, you can get a 4 cost in 3 rounds, about plus 9 gold of power, so don't like freak out, but it is still like a little delayed power, which is really good. One B, which is really funny, you know, or 2 like 3 carry kind of game. So pretty cool. The only drawback is I think Kale's Boon is one of the weaker ones. All it does is it upgrades one of your items on bench or on board, so you can't like game this in any way, randomly into a radiant. You don't get to pick which one. So being plus 1 radiant, it's like almost like a masterwork upgrade that you didn't get to pick. So, but you are up like 3 components for picking Kale a bunch. So Soraka is all about healing. So you can see here, in addition, like I said, these are really good for anima games. You're gonna see a lot of people trying to play anima to read that out. But it's not always HP, right? Sometimes it might just be a giant spell or an implant, which gives health. So one of the things that can actually backfire is there's 2 types. There's random loot, which is basically just like, here, have some champions, here, have some items, here, have some whatever. Or there's literally random boon. And what that means is pick from any other, even the gods not in the game, 2 cost or random boon from their stage 2. So this might randomly pick a sparring glove, or it might randomly pick a 2-star 2 cost and you lose 1 HP. And yes, it can give you the penalties of them. So, you know, but because it gives you that extra gold, I actually think this will end up a lot like the Destiny augments at the start of 13 or 16, where I think this is going to be like very popular early, and we may even back on the gold a little, but I think people will pick this a lot. And then his boon is actually one of my favorites, which is for the rest of the game, every turn he rolls a dice. A 1, for example, is like gain 5 gold. A 3, for example, is like your team gains 50 permanent health, and the augment will show how much stats.
这游戏很强。
And a 6 is like an extra component and some gold. And so like over time, if you can last to like 6-2, 6-3, Thresh's boon becomes the most powerful because you look at everything.
射雷西很强哎，射雷西无敌
But it starts off weak, and so Thresh is one that you don't want to necessarily align with unless you know you can last a while to take advantage of his boon. Varus is all about like duplicating and making more champions and love and stuff like that. So for example, when it says a 2 and a 3 cost here, the thing it's not saying is a 2 and a 3 cost that share a trait. Tiny duplicators, if you're playing like a 1 cost reroll. If you see Varus a lot of the times, a Varus game kind of says like you might want to consider rerolling, but not force it, because sometimes it's stuff that aren't necessarily to your liking, right? Like if you're like, oh, it's a Varus game, I'm going to play a 1 cost reroll, and then you get owned 3 costs. Well, that didn't help you, you know? So just be careful. Liking, right? Like if you're like, oh, it's a Varus game, I'm going to play a 1 cost reroll, and then you get owned 3 costs. One of your quick, and like that's pretty cool. And his boon is a combat power 1 that basically says gain 10 health for each total star level in your army, and increase your 5 cost by 4%.
假设有7只7、3、21、220。
Yasuo is probably a standard combat power 1. He gives you hexes, and the hexes are cool because you get them as, a paintbrush, so you can put them where you want them, like double stacking HP, which is really cool. Overall, these stage full items and a random emblem, it's just +1 full items that shows you the stage 5 and 6 carousel. Those are gone. You'll simply just get an armory that shows you 3 full items and 6 choices.
对啊，按后面的嘞
can help lean you in certain directions and make certain choices. Now from there, what happens, by the way, is on the stage 5 and 6 carousel, those are gone. You'll simply just get an armory that shows you 3 full items and a random.
哦，对，就是给你一堆。后面的转盘不见，就是给你铁针或者是选项给你选。
Player no longer has any advantage. And that's the last thing I'll talk about with the mechanic. I tweeted about this, but basically, because there's no carousel, there's nothing like being an 8th on the realm of the god doesn't do anything. What happens is on the PBE rounds, every PBE round is guaranteed to drop at least 2 components for everybody. But the components for 7th and 8th, 2 of them will be anvils instead. So it gives you a little more agency in your items, but only stage 2 and 3 really, because stage 4 is the 4-7 choice, so nothing really changes there. So basically, if you're lost streaking stage 2, you can expect a few extra anvils. If you're lost streaking stage 3, you can expect a few extra anvils. But otherwise, there's not as much advantage to losing this set. You also get some reforgers as well if you're in like 3rd or 4th. But just something to be aware of. But yeah, that's kind of the mechanic for the set.
野麦的人的补偿机制是有些闪现会变铁针。
And I'm not going to go over all of them, but is some of the new augments. And so again, I won't go over all of them, but we have some hero augments for tanks like Poppy, Aatrox, Nasus. Charge transfer, which is all about overkill damage. Let's see. This one's interesting. Forge a friend. It's at 4-2, but allows you to buy a 1-cost champion and turn them into 3-star if you want something for your comp that you may have missed earlier. Cognitive tax is literally my team trolling you guys. Gain 8 gold and 1 XP. The 1 XP is just so that you're like annoyed of the fact you have an odd number of XP for the rest of the game. But it's not that bad because you can just play Timebreaker to get 1 XP and fix it. So it actually ends up being like 1 gold over budget. Cost on 2-1 and 1 gold. It's basically Warpath, but without the back end. But as a tempo player, I think Kickstart is bonkers. Feeling lucky. If this hits heads, you're like 2 gold over budget. If it hits tails, you're like 1 gold under budget. So just a fun little like bet there.
那谁要选这个？我要选这个啊，我才不要选这个嘞。
The Expedition Augment, this one will be the most interesting. I talked about this on Froden's.
来搞笑的啊！这两个，一个是12块，然后2/2的几率再多3块，一个是12块加3经验。除非你真的很穷。
Units to it every turn. You almost like want to feed a 3-cost every turn if you can. Lost streak. Try this one out, but A spot
不
that
过
you're
这
like,
是3
let's
经
see
验。
here. Anima Commanders, your chance to like play Anima, much like the Ishtal one right now. Something to note here is it's listing a couple trait ones like Sniper's Nest. Those are not in the set yet.
狙
We're
击
actually
专
gonna
属、百兽
ship
专
those
属。
later as things go on. Gragas has a hero back 3-2 and a 4-2. And you should think of them as econ augments because they're basically, here's some champions. 2-1, a 3-2, and a 4-2. And you should think of them as econ augments because they're basically, here's some champions. But, like any booster pack, you can have some high rolls, right? So like a booster pack on 2-1, if you have a crazy high roll, could give you a 2-star 3 cost. That seems good. And in addition, I don't know if I should tell you this and let you guys figure this out on your own, but there are special rewards in these booster packs sometimes. And when I say special, don't keep your expectations low. But like, what would a foil card look like in a booster pack? Well, what's a foil champion look like? So there's some weird stuff that can happen here. Booster packs are a lot of fun. I think Kent put a lot of love into these.
闪
So
卡
definitely give them a
各位
try.
好想选
Tell
哦。
everyone about the type of booster packs you get. There's some fun surprises in there.
看你的闪卡
Combat
好
stuff.
想开哦。他怎么办？我是主播，他会让我很想当主播，好想开闪卡。对啊，加强多
Foundation's a
少？
cool one. Gain a 2-star 1-cost tank and an emblem for their listed trait, stuff like that. It's pretty cool. Yeah. Otherwise, some pretty good stuff. 5-pointed star, I believe, actually got cut, so I don't know if that's in there.
5-point star
layer is the one we talked about. Not a lot of new prismatics right now. Flip a coin. This one's even changed since then. Flip a coin. If heads, gain a radiant lucky item chest. If tails, I believe it's gained 2 full items. So there's some risk actually in Golden Gamble now. But yeah. So there you go. And that's everything for now. I gotta wrap this up.
但这个也太烂了吧！这不就原本的？这不就原本的那个圣光生物的弱化版？
Obviously, all the new cosmetics as well. PBE should be going live soon. Hopefully, you guys enjoy. But there you go. Space Gods. Lots of cool stuff. So, cool.
看完了，来，我们再来看一下最后的评论。
Hey,
你怎么拼啊？我怎么突然不会拼了？好，哎，那我刚拼错吗？我刚不是拼路易尔的吗？ So we have model. Model is a weird dev. Oops, weird one. OK， 我没有说太多话，因为有点困。我今天开台，我本来没有要开台的，但我觉得看这个东西一个人看有点看不完，但是我又觉得我该把它看完，努力了，我很棒。有没有要打啊？怎么样？就等明天测试了。你开始了什么意思？你开始什么了？好了，我现在几点？下午2点半。Space God， 你说大乱斗啊？你为什么今天不用上班？看完他讲之后， 其实我一边把整个阵容思考给，我感觉我可以比赛了。啊，不然也累了。各位，我们明天凌晨，我们明天凌晨见。明天实测开打，还是我们要打一把大乱斗？有不要打大乱斗？我思考一下。好想打大乱斗，快要没有时间打大乱斗了。大家晚安。睡饱一点，明天早上见。拜拜，雅静，拜拜。
吗？现在剩一个人吗？